Welfare Committee is now called to order. First up on our agenda today is we are having a hearing on House Bill 2209. And to give us a bill explanation with the Revisor's Office is Jenna Moyer. Jenna, thank you for the bill explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. House Bill 2209 would enact, pull up my notes here, the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact to provide for interjurisdictional authorization to practice telepsychology and temporary in-person face-to-face psychology. And this bill did pass the House on about a 121-3, and this would enact this really long named act, which they just refer to as PSY, PACT, or Psych Pact. And this would allow, it's kind of a long bill, so I won't go through every single provision, but it would just allow psychologists to practice as part of this interjurisdictional compact. And it would make it easier for psychologists who are licensed to practice telepsychology as well as in-person psychology. Article 2, which begins on page 2, just goes through the definitions of terms that are used in this act, and it's a few pages long. And Article 3, which begins on page 5, line 5, defines what a home state is, and that's a compact state where a psychologist is licensed to practice psychology. And then Article 4 goes over the privileges of the compact to practice telepsychology, which begins on page 6 of the bill. Article 5 goes into the temporary authorization to practice in another state, and that begins on page 8. Article 6 goes through the conditions of telepsychology practice, or the conditions that you would have to fulfill to practice in a receiving state. Article 7 just goes through the adverse actions that could be taken against a licensee or against a psychologist license, issued by a home state. Article 8 is additional authorities that are invested in those licensed states. Article 9 on page 12 allows for a coordinated licensure information system, so that information sharing between those licensure states. Article 10 establishes the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact Commission. And then Article 11 allows for rulemaking that would govern that commission. Article 12, which begins on page 20, goes through the oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement that is part of the compact. Article 13 has the implementation date of the compact when the seventh state is admitted, or a seventh state passes and enters into law that compact. And then Article 14 just provides for severability. And the House committee did make an amendment to this that would put its effective date back to January 1st, 2022. And I'm sure the proponents have more details about all of the sort of complicated provisions in here, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Committee, do we have any questions for Jenna over the bill? Seeing none. Jenna, thank you. Committee, our first proponent is Whitney Dameron on behalf of the Kansas Psychological Association. Whitney, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Whitney Dameron, representing the Kansas Psychological Association, which is an association dating back to 1930 of the professional psychologist, PhD level psychologist. We're here in support of legislation which is referred to as PSY-PACT, and it's an interjurisdictional psychological compact that I'd just like to give a brief introduction, and then Janet Orwig, who is the executive director of the association, will talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of how this thing works. I do want to say up front, PSY-PACT has nothing to do with insurance or reimbursement or any of those kinds of things. That's totally unrelated issues. The state of Kansas has dealt with these kind of multi-state compacts in the past. We already have on the books the compacts for medicine, nursing, emergency management. You've had hearings on a bill this year, Senate Bill 77. You've got another one following this one today that came over from the House. on physical therapy. You'll also hear that this legislation, which is all states essentially look at the same kind of legislation and adopt it in multiple states. It's been adopted in 18 states, including the 4 states around Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma. It's currently being considered in Iowa as well. There are also 13 additional states looking at it this year. When I started this testimony in the House, there were 15 states that had passed it, so 3 have passed it just here in the last month or so around the country. You heard from the reviser that this was passed on a vote of 121 to 3. And when we testified in the House, we'd started this process and communicated our interest in this legislation to the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board in mid-2020. They expressed concerns in the House hearing about the ability to kind of get up and running and get their arms around this legislation when it had a July 1, 2021 enactment date. We offered in the hearings that we were fine with moving the date to January 1, 2022 instead of a July 1 date of this year. The way SIPAC also works is the state has a designee that they would appoint to SIPAC. They have 90 days after legislation is adopted, so essentially we're talking about April 1, 2022 before this would kind of go live. We would like to see this legislation passed this year so we can set in place of all parties concerned, professional psychologists and the PSRB, to work towards successful implementation in 2022. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions, but I think Janet Orwig, the executive director, probably is best to talk about the details of how SIPAC works.
Whitney, thank you for that testimony. In committee, we will hold questions until all proponents have had an opportunity to testify. Janet Orwig, the Executive Director of Psychology for Interjurisdictional Compact, is with us virtually. Janet, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Hildebrand and members of the committee. Hello, I am Janet Orwig, Executive Director for SIPAC, and I am here in support of House Bill 2209 that would open the door for the state of Kansas becoming part of SIPAC. My written testimony, along with a 2-page summary of the legislation and a SIPAC fact sheet, was provided for your review. I would like to express my appreciation for your consideration of the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, or SIPAC legislation. SIPAC allows for the interstate practice of telehealth as well as the ability to practice for a limited period of time while physically located in a SIPAC participating state. SIPAC is an interstate compact which provides a mechanism for ethical and legal practice of telepsychology as it reduces regulatory barriers and provides for client or patient protection. An interstate compact creates a contract among its members, and to join the compact, the state must adopt the same version of the compact language as the other member states to preserve the contract that all the states have agreed upon. The goal of SIPAC is to improve access to mental health services by facilitating the competent practice of telehealth by licensed psychologists across state lines, and represents a significant and crucial step to the profession of psychology. As people begin to understand more about mental health issues and the need to treat them, an increase in those seeking the services of psychologists may continue to grow. Unfortunately, like so many other health professions, psychologists are not always available in underserved areas. Increasingly, psychologists are using telehealth as a means to respond to the demand of their services. Psychology is uniquely suited to take advantage of telehealth services, as psychology intervention is talking and does not need additional equipment like some medical specialties. When done via live video links, research has shown treatments are as effective via telehealth as when patients come to the psychologist's offices. SIPAC would be particularly helpful when patients travel out of state. For patients such as family of military personnel who move frequently, and as has been seen during COVID, the American Psychological Association surveyed the psychology workforce, and 96% of those surveyed said they were treating patients remotely. SIPAC provides for the protection of the public by certifying that psychologists have met acceptable standards of practice. Importantly, it provides compact states with a mechanism to address disciplinary issues that occur across state lines. SIPAC protects public protection where none may currently exist for the interstate practice of telehealth. Several years of work preceded the final version of SciPact, much of which was completed in collaboration with many other psychology professional organizations, such as the American Psychological Association and the American Insurance Trust. Through this collective process, SciPact provides a means for providers to legitimately practice, as well as a mechanism for the oversight of such practice in such a manner to benefit all parties. This is important for the profession as well as for the protection of the public. Thank you for considering this very important mental health care issue.
Janet, thank you for your testimony. Committee, next we have Milford Dell, and he is here in person. Thank you. Doctor? Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Milford Dale. I go by Bud. I'm a licensed psychologist, a licensed attorney, and a businessman. My practice is here in Topeka. I approached the Kansas Psychological Association in July about SciPact because it's consistent with my business plan. I have been a licensed psychologist in Kansas since 1989, and I fit the criteria of the people who would be invited to, through SciPact, to provide services to Kansas citizens. That is, I'm a licensed PhD psychologist, and I have no ethical or board complaints. Okay? We're bringing in people who do good work. I'm also licensed in the state of Missouri and have been since 2015. I'm licensed in the state of Texas. I have been since 2019. My work includes child custody evaluations. I'm a national expert in high conflict divorce. When I do a child custody evaluation, that includes a home visit. Every time I go out of state, I have to check with the Board of Psychology in that state to either get a temporary permit, to get a permanent permit. I got one in Virginia for 2 days of work, okay? Or otherwise get someone to supervise me or to find out how they manage that. So SciPact manages my business model, or matches my business model. I also, that they haven't mentioned yet, so remember what a $10 bill looks like with our debit cards? When SciPact wanted to bring states into the SciPact, they initially talked about states paying $6,000 for the privilege to be in the SciPact. They changed that. They changed that so that they now are going to charge the states $10 for every psychologist that is signed up in that state. I'm asking the state of Kansas to invest $10 in me. All right? That means one billable hour. My fees are between $150 and $300 an hour. I consult in cases all over the country. I manage an international listserv of 500 child custody evaluations with people on 4 different continents. I'm asking for the state of Kansas to join SciPact because it's good business. It's good business for Kansas. You're going to hear about some potential cost to SciPact, about whether or not people would sign up to be licensed in Kansas if we had SciPact, or if there would be an increase in licensing board complaints. Since SciPact went live in 2019, the number of board complaints is an interesting number. It is 0. And that's because if you join this, you can have no history of disciplinary action, and if you have disciplinary action, you're out. Okay? That there are provisions so that the state of Kansas can protect the citizens of Kansas from people who don't operate in an effective and an ethical manner. Since the World Health Organization declared a pandemic on March 11, 2020, I've written an article about my work in using video conferencing. I presented actually from my office in Topeka, in Colorado, in California, New York, and Nevada. I believe that video conferencing can work. In the article, I reviewed the research that shows that it can, and I'm just going to ask Kansas to support SciPact because it's a good business plan and it's the way of the future. Thank you.
Bud, thank you for your testimony. Committee, this does wrap up our proponent oral testimony. We do have some written testimony. There's 2, so draw your attention to that if you want to review that as well. Committee, we will now open up for questions, and I do actually have 2 My first one is Bud, if you wouldn't mind stepping back up and just stating your name and who you are with after I ask my question and when you start to talk. The prop that you brought was $10, but you said the state is going to pay that. Before you said the state was going to pay that, I was very much in favor of your side pack. Who is actually paying that $10?
I believe that would come out of the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. That's my understanding. But I believe Janet Orwig would better answer that question, because she would know specifically.
Janet, would you mind answering that question?
I'm Janet Orwig with SciPact, Chairman, and it really depends on the state. Some of the states have their general fund. Some of them have it coming out of the licensing board monies as well. So it really depends on the state and how it would be set up.
Okay, I appreciate that, but when I read the bill, I didn't see anywhere where it sets it up in the bill. Jenna, could you kind of give us a little overview, make sure I didn't miss something? Is that in the bill of how those fees will be paid?
In the bill itself, it talks about that the commission can levy an assessment fee and a state assessment fee. And in the rules, when we originally were looking at SciPact, we were thinking that because of some of the other compacts, Nursing Compact does charge a state assessment fee, and their fee is $6,000 per state to participate. But we realized psychology numbers are much smaller than nursing. And so when the commission had its first meeting, they reviewed the state assessment fees, and they felt that based on the number of psychologists, we're looking at a $10 per psychologist fee to be assessed to the state. That psychologist listed Kansas as their home state. You would be assessed $10 for that person. What we have seen so far is that out of the about 40,000 psychologists that can practice in the current SciPact states, a little under 5% of those are actually participating in SciPact. So it hasn't, it's met a need, but it's not a flooding of psychologists. So it would only be impacting you based on the current licensees in Kansas that would list Kansas as their home state.
Okay, I apologize. I'm going to try to simplify this question down as much as I can. I understand $10 is going to be paid per psychologist. I understand that this possibility is going to come from the board or somewhere else. My question, I guess, really is the initial $10, where does that come from that goes to the board that the board's going to pay it or whoever's going to pay it? Is it tax dollars? Is it SGF? Is it the psychologists that are entered into it, this compact? That's where I'm curious of where that $10 comes from.
Mr. Chair, I believe that it would come from the licensing fees that the board takes in. I have been in contact with the executive director for the board, and there is no current restriction to the board to pass that on to the psychologist. It has not been done in any other SciPact states, but there is no restriction, and we have been discussing that with the board as an option possibly for the $10 fees. But at this time, the current SciPact states are taking that out of the licensing fees that come in from their states.
Okay, thank you. So no SGF dollars. My second question maybe is for, I probably should ask this to Jenna, but on Article 3, page 5, line 7 of the bill, or line 17, I apologize. I just want to clarify, because I understand compacts, but I also understand reciprocity. In this paragraph, it says any compact state may require a psychologist not previously licensed in a compact state to obtain and retain a license to be authorized to practice in the compact state under circumstances not authorized by the authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology under the terms of this compact. So is that negating reciprocity, or am I reading that wrong?
Chairman, you were addressing that to me? I'm sorry.
No, I was addressing that to our revisor.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize.
Okay.
Jenna
Thank you,
Moyer.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, Janet and Jenna can kind of sound alike through the WebEx. So I would not interpret that to undermine the reciprocity, but just that additional conditions could be put on that authority to practice in that other compact state.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any further questions? Senator Petty.
I was part of a dialogue with Executive Director David Fye, who identified the number of licensed psychologists in Kansas, and I think he probably testified to that. And a member of the House mentioned, would this chill recruitment because you could do the work with people in underserved areas without moving there? And I think that's possible. I know the University of Kansas Med Center, Dr. Evelyn Nelson, is doing research on telemedicine in underserved areas throughout Kansas. I think it's kind of keeping up with the rest of the people in terms of having this like other places would have. If you were comparing a job or practice in Kansas and that didn't have SIPAC with Missouri, for example, that had SIPAC, Kansas wouldn't measure up, wouldn't compare well. But one of the things that does happen here with the telepsychology is that you can be everywhere. I have cases now in Geary County, Sedgwick County, and Johnson County, and in Texas, and in Nebraska, and I do it all from my office in Topeka. So it's a way to serve people. I think it would be a disadvantage if Kansas didn't have it when we were comparing people coming out of training looking for jobs.
Thank you, and I apologize, I didn't have my mic on. I apologize for that.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. This is a question for you. Let's say we didn't have this compact, and you said you were licensed in other states. So you could still do that in other states, correct?
I can still do it in the states where I'm licensed, or where I've contacted the licensing board to get a temporary license or permit.
All right. So by not having the compact does not standing in your way to be able to offer these services?
Not in those states. If I didn't have, I don't have SIPAC now, so I have to go to each state in each case to find out how to go and do that work there.
And so that is the main reason, is that it's just for ease for you to be able to do it in other states, because you wouldn't have to get technically licensed in those states because they have this.
Well, that's certainly a benefit, yes.
Okay. If the state, this is my last question, sorry, Mr. Chair. If a state were to set up reciprocity with the state of Kansas, let's say, wouldn't that accomplish the same function? I know that there are states that 5, 6 states go together and say we're going to have reciprocity.
My understanding of reciprocity, and when I've looked into that, and I was looking into that yesterday about the state of Michigan, is that you still have to fill out all of the paperwork and sign up and register in that other state. For example, Tennessee or Michigan does not allow temporary practice, but they have a licensure by endorsement. So it's an application process and a fee that's, I think, between $200 and $250. But I have to go through the process to be vetted, which means I have to send them my EPPP score, which was my licensing exam. I have to send them the addresses of all the states where I've been licensed so they can check on any disciplinary record. I have to walk through those steps. In Texas, I had to take a jurisprudence exam on the law in Texas. So they recognize a certain level of your experience and your training, but not all of it. And it's not, certainly the effect and the benefit for me as a businessman is the simplicity of SIPAC, that ASPPB and SIPAC is vetting me and tracking me. ASPPB, the Association of State Provisional and Psychology Boards in the United States and Kansas, where SIPAC originates, tracks all of the disciplinary complaints against psychologists across the United States and Canada. So they would see if I was behaving or unethically or behaving badly.
Thank you.
Committee, not seeing any more questions, we'll move on to neutral testimony. And we do have one neutral conferee, Dave Fye, the Executive Director of BSRB. Dave, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Fye. I'm the Executive Director of the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. We are the state agency that licenses most of the state's mental health professionals, including licensed psychologists, which would be underneath SIPAC if they chose to participate if this was passed in Kansas. And we are providing neutral testimony for the committee because the board has discussed SIPAC several times and has collected additional information, and the board does have some concerns. So we are providing neutral testimony, but we want to make you aware of certain issues. The Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board is supportive of innovative and creative solutions to increase services in Kansas. In fact, they have been very aggressive this spring. Usually they meet every other month, and they've already met 6 times this year so far to hear from individuals. And you've heard 2 of the bills that the board has requested in 2208 and also Senate Bill 238. So we're supportive of efforts to go ahead and increase services for individuals, but we are a public protection agency, and our primary objective is to protect the individuals who receive services, so that can't come at the sacrifice of that protection. This bill, House Bill 2209, would add Kansas to a multi-state compact, and it would allow individuals from out of state, if they're in the compact, to provide telehealth services in Kansas and up to 30 days of in-state practice if they choose to do that under the compact. Basically, right now in Kansas, one of the ways that we provide public protection for individuals is by providing oversight of the licensing process. And we do that through permanent licenses, temporary licenses, and out-of-state temporary permits. However, it's important to realize that this compact would delegate some of this authority. Some of it would be shared between Kansas and other states, and some of it would be delegated from a state to a non-state entity to provide oversight of this process. So I think it's important to understand that. Also, this would be a big change in the way that the state budget is balanced for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Currently, we are entirely fee-funded. We don't receive money from the state general fund, and we receive money from licenses from individuals, and this license money is spread between the 2 programs we have, the licensure program and the investigation and discipline program. And I have presented in my testimony 3 main concerns that the board has raised, and I wanted to highlight those for you today. One would be the economic impact on the agency should SIPAC pass. As I mentioned, this licensure fee is what we currently use for the licensure program and to investigate complaints. It is anticipated that we have about 1,000 licensed psychologists in Kansas, and about 300 of these are from out-of-state individuals. And it's anticipated that some of these individuals are going to choose to participate in SIPAC rather than continue their Kansas license. And if that happens, Kansas will have less licensure revenue. However, if there are complaints, we will still need to investigate these. And so that is less money available to investigate the complaints. Additionally, if you have more individuals practicing in Kansas under this compact, it's just a numbers game. You bring in a lot of additional providers to the state of Kansas, it is expected that there will be additional complaints. And so we'll still need to investigate those complaints. And you heard reference to the $10 charge per individual in Kansas who would participate under SIPAC. That topic really hasn't had a great deal of discussion. I did talk to Janet Orwig yesterday concerning that, and I reached out to other states. I've been trying to dig into SIPAC and learn more about this compact. I spoke with representatives from 6 different states, and they are funded differently in different states. So I understand some states do receive an appropriation specifically for this purpose. But it's my understanding that if Kansas would be in SIPAC, this charge per person participating would be something that the agency would just have to eat the cost of. And currently, our budget is not built on that cost. And so I want to make you aware of that because right now, SIPAC has actually not, so the timeline of SIPAC, July of 2020, to my understanding, is when SIPAC originally began to receive applications from individuals to provide services through telehealth services across the states. So we really don't have a full year of data to analyze and look at some of these trends, for example, states to see if they've had decreased licenses or to see how much the uptake is for the individuals. We have about maybe half of a year or 3/4 of a year, but we don't have a lot of data that I can tell you, here's what to expect in Kansas should SIPAC pass. So I want to make you aware of those details. The board also did have concerns about some of the different things under the compact. For example, if you have an out-of-state practitioner, how would you file a complaint against that person? And we have received additional information from SIPAC on that point. We still think there might be some confusion for the public, so we would request additional information is spread to individuals so they know they can file it in Kansas or with the home state of the individual. And also, there would be investigations of complaints under the SIPAC, and these could be coordinated between states, but there's still a little bit of confusion, and I talked to several states about the method to do this, and I think there's still a little bit of questions in terms of how these would be coordinated because SIPAC is so new. So we do have neutral testimony, but I thought it would be necessary for me to bring forward these points of discussion the board has had and the concerns. I'm a data-driven person, and so I like to look at the numbers and try to do an estimate for Kansas. When I submitted the fiscal note on this bill, I couldn't come up with a number because SIPAC is just so new. So it's not to say that we're not supportive of this, but we do expect there to be an economic impact on the agency in a negative way. And if SIPAC passes, and we do see that, we may have to come before you next year with some creative solution to recoup some of this lost revenue. So I wanted to bring these thoughts to you today, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Dave, thank you for your testimony. Committee, do we have any questions for Dave? Fi. Seeing none. Dave, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, that does wrap up our testimony. There are no opponents. Unless there is someone that is wanting to testify on the bill as a proponent, neutral, or opponent, seeing none, we will now close our hearing on House Bill 2209, and we will now open up the hearing on House Bill 2279. And again, with the Revisor's Office, to explain the bill is Jenna Moyer. Jenna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2277 enacts the Physical Therapy Licensure Compact and authorizes criminal history record checks. And this would enact the Interstate Practice Authority for Physical Therapists in compact states. Section 1 of the bill is a purpose statement. Section 2 is just definitions. Section 3 is requirements for state participation in this compact. And Section 4 sets out the requirements to exercise the compact privileges, which is that a licensee would be required to hold a license in their home state and have no encumbrances on that home state license. They'd be required to be eligible for compact privileges in a member state. No adverse actions against their license. They'd be required to notify the commission if they are seeking compact privileges, pay any required fees, meet jurisdictional requirements, and report to the commission any adverse action taken by a non-member state within 30 days. Section 5 relates to active duty military personnel and their spouses and how they could become members of the compact. And then next would be Section 6, sets out that the home state would retain exclusive authority to impose adverse action against a license issued by the home state. And so the home state keeps authority over their licensees to essentially punish licensees who are misbehaving. And remote states can do the same for licensees against a licensed compact privilege in the state. Section 7 deals with the creation of the Physical Therapy Compact Commission as well as its powers. Section 8 sets up that database and reporting system. Section 9 is rulemaking authority. Section 10 is oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement. And Section 11 states that the compact will go into effect when the compact is enacted in the 10th state. And I looked it up before the meeting, and 30 states have enacted compact legislation, including Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Colorado. Section 12 sets up severability, and then this bill, House Bill 2277, also creates a new section of law that would require, and this section would go into the Physical Therapy Licensure Act, and it would require fingerprinting and state, federal criminal history record check in new applications or applications for reinstatement for licensure as a physical therapist or physical therapist assistant. And this bill also amends 3 sections in the Physical Therapy Practice Act just to coordinate with the additional adoption of the compact language. And that would be the board's authority to refuse, suspend, or revoke license, liability insurance, as well as minimum educational requirements for dry needling, which is more commonly known as acupuncture. And this bill passed the House on a vote of 122 to 2. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions for Jenna over the bill? Okay, seeing none, we will now move to proponent testimony. First up, we have Jennifer Caswell. She is the APTA Kansas Chapter Legislative Chair. And Jennifer, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. I appreciate your time and letting me be here today. My name is Jennifer Caswell. I am the APTA Kansas Legislative Chair. I am also a physical therapist and a business owner in Overland Park, Kansas. So I come to you today, and I also wanted, before I start, thank Eileen Ma for putting together and drafting this language for us. She did a great job with that. I really appreciate that. As Jenna mentioned, there are 30 states that are currently in the compact. 20 of them currently are practicing and issuing compact privileges, again, with all of the surrounding states around Kansas. I think that's important to note as well, and Stacia will speak behind me about some of the nuances with that. We've had numerous discussions over the last few years to make sure that everybody was on board. We've spoken with Tucker Polling the last few months, Kansas State Board of Healing Arts, FSBPT, who is the governing body for the compact, to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row and everybody was happy with what was going on. Specifically when it came down to the malpractice insurance, that was a concern. So we made sure that there are some provisions in there to take care of patient safety. So again, that's the important thing. AJ Thomas, who has provided written testimony, was unable to be here today, but he is the CEO of Rooks County Hospital, and he's also a physical therapist. So right now he's in meetings and couldn't be here. But if you get a chance to look at his testimony, because he's in Western Kansas, he's had a lot of trouble getting physical therapists out there. So not too long ago, and it's a bit in his testimony as well, he had one of his physical therapists go on maternity leave. So he had to choose between being the CEO of his hospital or stepping up and being the PT. So it was easier for him just to step up and be the PT as opposed to try to find somebody to come in. To get licensed in the state of Kansas can take weeks and weeks. To make that happen with the PT compact, it can happen in hours. So if AJ finds out that somebody's going to be gone for an extended period of time in Western Kansas, he can easily get somebody to step up and come in and see patients tomorrow with this PT compact. With the way things currently are with licensure, it's going to take weeks and weeks to get somebody in, having to go through all those steps. And that's the biggest thing I wanted to discuss. And then I'm going to let Stacia talk about some of the issues when it comes to the students coming out of PT school now. Thank you so much for your time.
Jennifer, thank you for your testimony. Committee, Camille Snyder, she is here virtually to answer any questions. She has changed her testimony from oral to written only. So next we have Stacia Trzynski Brown, and she is a clinical professor at KUMC PT and Rehab Science Program. Stacia, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's wonderful to be with you here today. My name is Stacia Trzynski Brown. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of Kansas Medical Center in the physical therapy department. You know that we have a wonderful physical therapy program. It's rated very highly nationally, and it's located right on State Line Road. And so we have a beautiful facility. Our students are doing great things. They're working in their labs, and they can look out of their classroom windows and see Missouri and Kansas. And so they have choices, and we know that. And these are very highly trained, locally trained individuals. We would love to be able to keep them licensed here in Kansas. And so a lot of times our new grads want a lot of flexibility. They want the opportunity to have some choices. And we would love to be able to keep them licensed in Kansas. I know when they look at the compact map, where they can see all of the other states around us having the compact and not Kansas, they ask us why. And so they really want to have that flexibility and that opportunity to practice in a few different areas if travel or whatever might be available to them. We also know the impact that our military spouses can have with a compact in action. And so we know you've heard that in multiple testimonies from other compact bills in the past also. So I just wanted to put that on your radar as well. Thank you so much.
Stacia, thank you for that, your testimony. Committee, that does wrap up our oral testimony. We do have written only one with A.J. Thomas. He is the CEO of Rooks County Health Center. We will now open up for questions for any of the proponents. Committee, do we have any questions for proponents? Senator Thompson.
I guess the question would be similar to what we talked about in the last compact. Are the fees going to be coming out of the board or anything out of the state general fund, or how's it going to be funded?
Thank you for the question. Do I need to announce who I am again? Jennifer Caswell, APTA Kansas Legislative Chair. Yes, that can be assessed to the actual person that's applying for the compact themselves. So the fees are not set yet until we actually become part of the compact, and then the state can determine how much fees they want to assess for each one of those compact privilege holders coming in.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair.
And that's what other states have done.
Senator Petty.
Put on my mic this time. Jennifer, this might be in your testimony to someone else. So how long has the physical therapist compact been in place?
I want to say 2016 or 2017. I believe that's correct. Missouri was one of the first 5 states, so it has been 4 to 5 years, I believe, since it's been enacted.
Entertainment all the time. There are 30 states that are in the compact presently. You said something about 20 of them are active and 10 are still in the process?
Yeah, so they've had the bill passed, and now it's law, but then they have to go through the whatever the rules and regulations to actually start accepting compact privilege holders. So, I mean, it'll be within a few months before most of those are now part of the compact.
And I guess I should look, we have in our statute, we take enforcement after the publication of the statute book, but that we would still be talking about rules and regs being put in place to have it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. So unlike the telemedicine, like we heard right in front of you on from the psychologist, physical therapy, of course, is a hands-on. So when we talk about new, and maybe this is more for you than for you, but if we talk about the new people coming out and the new students that are just getting their license, good for them, then they can choose which state to go to, right? But it's unlikely that they'll be jumping from state to state, or they could move and get licensed in that new state. And my biggest concern, and I'll just share this here about compacts, is, and what was stated earlier, that they kind of take over, and a state has very little autonomy after that, and it's more like, what does the compact want, as opposed to what does the state want? What does this legislature feel is best? What does the board feel is best? Like, well, we got to meet whatever, the compact said. So typically I'm a no when it comes to that, unless you can convince me that's something that's desperately needed for these folks. So could you come to the mic, and could I ask you a question about that? What would be the advantage to these young people that are on state line?
I can speak a bit to that too. I'm also adjunct faculty, and I'll let Stacia speak as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I have heard from a lot of the students as well, and Stacia might be able to back this up, that they can choose where they want to live as their home state. And so a lot of them do choose to live in Missouri. You're right, it's not because they're bouncing back and forth necessarily. Some of them want to do travel therapy. So they want to, settle down and get roots somewhere. And so they have to choose their home state. And so for some of them, they're choosing the home state based on who has the compact privileges, so that they can decide, I want to travel for the next few years until I settle down and have a family. So that's some of the things that I'm hearing, is that they want a bit of that flexibility to have that. And before I let Stacia speak really quickly, when it comes to some of the, you're discussing, whether we feel like we have to now abide by all compact rules, I think that we've come with a great solution when it comes to some of the issues that Kansas faces that's different than a lot of the other states when it comes to our continuing education requirements, the dry needling like it was discussed, the malpractice insurance. So we've made sure that there are provisions in there to take care of those people because, again, that's patient protection. So we just want to make sure that we're doing what's right and what the Board of Healing Arts set out for us to make sure that we're taking care of people here in Kansas. So
Thank you.
it does, we did make sure that there was a piece in there that we could keep that sacred.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stacia Troshinsky Brown, clinical assistant professor at University of Kansas Medical Center. I guess my answer to the question would be that it's not for everyone. The compact is not something every single licensed physical therapist or physical therapist assistant, would even think about, simply because it's an extra step. And many of them, when they are licensed and practicing in one area, they don't need that flexibility. We do see that in the Kansas City area where there is just so much movement across the state line. We have therapists who are working home health contracts, and they might have some contracts, and some of the patients that they're seeing are on the Kansas side, some are the Missouri side. We also see this along the northern border close to Nebraska. So some of the therapists are maybe traveling, maybe they're living on the family farm and they're traveling to the nearest hospital to work. And so I would say that it really is dependent on that person, and it provides some flexibility for them to have that license flexibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's use a real example. So how I'm hearing this compact is a bit different, is that the state is saying, okay, we're going to join. They really don't have jurisdiction over us. They can't tell us what to do. And each individual physical therapist can choose to join the compact, and all we're doing is offering it. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Senator Petty.
I'll just follow up to that, and Stacia. So you had referred to, here, I live in Kansas City, so that's fine. You had referred to the med center and being run on a state line, but I was just thinking, I do have a relative who's in the program at Wichita, and so lives in Winfield, which is just, like not quite even an hour off from the border of Oklahoma. So it would be similar there as well, that once he completes his program, he could have that option of, with the compact, of being licensed, but being able to practice easily in either state. Would that be correct?
Yes, Stacia Troshinsky Brown, clinical assistant professor at KU Med. Yes, that is correct. And so, and I know that in A.J. Thomas's written testimony, and he shared with us examples of, with that maternity leave, he had a friend who was a physical therapist in Nebraska who could have just dropped down and come over and filled in for a little bit if we had that flexibility. And it's the same, it would be the same with the Oklahoma border, so.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Committee, not seeing any further questions, we will now close the hearing on House Bill 2279. Committee, we have 2 minutes. So what I would like to do, I know we had a hearing on House Bill 2115. It was the Welfare System Oversight Committee. I am not aware of any amendments on this one. I think it's a bill that we might be able to kick out today if we can do it in less than 2 minutes. So Jenna, can you just give us a brief overview of what HB 2115 was, please?
Yep. As a brief reminder, House Bill 2115 establishes the Child Welfare System Oversight Joint Committee.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions on that? Okay. Jenna, committee, I would like to work this bill, and I do have one amendment if nobody else has an amendment. Okay. So, Jenna, do you have it, or is it, we just need to talk about it, that amendment?
Yes, Mr. That's one that you can just do conceptually if you're okay with it.
Okay.
It's pretty standard.
Yes, okay. So this is a pretty difficult amendment. We are going all the way to page 3, line 42, and we are going to change the enactment date from Kansas Register to Kansas Statute Book. That is my offer. Senator Baumgartner seconds it. So do we have any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Ayes have it. Committee, what is your pleasure on this bill, House Bill 2115? Senator Holscher.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move we pass out Bill 2115 favorably.
As amended?
Yes, as amended.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Senator Holscher to pass out House Bill 2115 as amended. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Baumgartner. All those in favor? All those opposed? Would you like your vote recorded? Okay. That motion is carried. House Bill 2115 is now moving to the floor. Committee, I think, I know some of the other bills that we have pretty hefty amendments on them, or have some amendments, so we won't have time to work those. I know HB 2279 seemed a little bit less questionable than the first one we heard today. Would there be any objections to working House Bill 2279 today?
I'll make a motion to pass out 2279 for passage.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, but I would like to make a substitute motion on this. And this is, again, going back and changing the enactment date. I apologize. Let me look real quick. It is currently in the statute book, so I would like to offer an amendment to change that to the registry. And that is a motion now, substitute motion. Second by Senator Baumgartner. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All opposed? That motion carried. We are now back on the original motion, but it will probably need to be amended.
I'll make a motion to pass out House Bill 2279 as amended, favorably for passage.
Okay, we have a motion by Senator Petty to pass out House Bill 2279 as amended. A second by Senator Baumgartner. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Committee, thank you very much, and we will try to get some of these bills that I know we have amendments on. So we have tomorrow and Friday. If we're not able to get them tomorrow or Friday, I know Monday we have two confirmation hearings. It's a possibility we can get that work done then. If not, we will be here Tuesday. So unless there's anything else to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.